I think we have lost the sacredness of being human, of just being.
She created her own modality called Core Regeneration.
It's really based on understanding how the body functions through energy, and this method is the way to get to that point. I have learned in my 70 years that there is a way of dealing with difficulties that doesn't paralyze you. You can go on.
How do you get a very clear communication pathway from mind, body and soul?
It takes work.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Real Talk with Dan Shaw. Today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Helene van Diemen. She is a PhD graduate in holistic life counseling. Yes, I got it right. And she created her own modality called Core Regeneration. So I'm very excited to talk to you today, Helene. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start off by talking about what it is that you studied and where you even go to get a PhD in holistic life counseling. What does that even mean? And then we'll go into the Core Regeneration and how you set that up.
Okay. Well, I started as an aromatherapist many years ago. And since then, I've done a lot of studies, but...
You can mention what you've done. It would be very interesting to hear.
There's a whole list, but the latest ones would be CBT, NLP. So it's like workshops mostly. It's not like real studies.
No, but it's accumulative, and you see how they all intertwine with one another.
It's basically what I wanted is to use it as tools for core. And the holistic life counseling I did through the University of Metaphysics in Sedona. So it was online, but I loved it. I especially loved doing my master's, which was a lot of fun. What it means is basically that you can counsel people who are having issues, that kind of thing. I don't use the PhD as a unit for core regeneration. I use everything for core regeneration because what the plan was with Core Regeneration was to put together everything. Like I've also done courses in Reiki. I've also done courses in kinesiology and so on. So putting all of those things together to basically make a holistic practice that you can adjust to every person, every single person, because everybody is unique.
Mm-hmm. So what is Core Regeneration?
It is a method. That's really all it is. It is not a philosophy. There are lots of things incorporated in the whole of the course. And we look at things with Chinese medicine. We look at things, different things that we add into the whole, but it is just a method.
Okay, and what does that method entail? Besides, you say kinesiology, reflexology, not reflexology, excuse me. What's Reiki?
Reiki.
What else? What other modalities are incorporated into it, and how does it work for someone who really doesn't understand further than you saying it's a method?
Okay, so I did body talk, all the body talk courses as well. I did the kinesiology, and what that taught me was that you can use a muscle test, either by using a person's arm or using your fingers. You can use a pendulum, any of those things, to listen basically to the body's needs. So if you do a core regeneration therapy on anybody, you will use your muscle test to ask questions from the body, and the body will give you what it needs. So core regeneration isn't a fix-it-all. It's not a cure-all. It is not, everything doesn't work for everybody.
Would you say it's more like a navigation tool?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
So if I came in and said, I feel incredibly lethargic a lot of the time, what would your initial testing look like if you did a muscle test?
Okay, so we go in, first of all, when you start a core regeneration therapy session, it is really important to understand that you are basically entering sacred space. And you need to honor it as that. And then when you start the session, whatever your client told you, like you're lethargic, you're going to ignore that and you can listen to what the body wants right now. That might address the lethargy, but it will probably address other things
More
in order
important
to
things.
get to that point. It might change it. There's no guarantee of anything, but it's pretty accurate to say, let's say, just for example, you're not sleeping well enough, and that's what the core will tell you, that there's a sleep issue or even a deficiency issue. Who knows? I can't tell you right up front. Core tells me and guides me as to what I can give you, so there will be tools that you will use going forward.
Okay.
And it's up to you whether you're going to do it or not.
So if I lie on the bed, do you start the practice by using Reiki to feel the person's energy?
No.
How does it work?
I start, first of all, through permission statements. We have permission statements that we have permission from the body, and we have also permission from the universe or God or, whatever your belief system is. But it's really the universal integrity, and that is all cool, and you can go ahead and do the session. Once you've got that, you will simply ask questions according to the method, and that method will lead you to get answers from the body in order to discuss with your client what they need to go do.
And what does the method look like?
It's a yes and no questioning. So you have 3 levels in Core 1. You have 3 levels, and it's enormous. I mean, you can ask 100 questions. You can ask 150 questions. Hopefully not. You ask about 2 or 3 questions, and then it moves on from there. It's very simplistic and it's very logical. So you will start by asking questions under, for instance, level 1, and it will give you shoulder blades. And then it'll go from shoulder blades, it'll go to emotion. And that's how you sort of, as you said, navigate and find what you need in order to give the client as a tool to go forward.
Have you ever heard of theta healing?
Yes, I have.
Because a lot of these things, like using kinesiology and digging and asking permission and downloading and stuff like that, seems quite similar in its nature of what it tries to achieve. Also by asking the body what it's experiencing.
Well, that was my whole point with the therapy, was that all therapies are based on the same thing. And so I just wanted to put together as much as I could to make it as easy as possible for anybody who wanted to practice it. I mean, anybody can do core. Anybody.
So the way that you developed the module, obviously you integrated other aspects of the trainings that you had done, but how did you, besides experience, because I know that's a huge part of it, but besides that, how did you figure out exactly how the structure needed to look in terms of the tools that you were using?
Gee, that's a difficult question, because it took us 2 years to put it together. And it was by trial and error, really. What is important? Where do you start? What is your next step? What is your next question? It was trial and error, and a lot of it. So we'd practice what we thought would work, and then it wouldn't work, and then we'd try something else. So it was 2 years of sitting together with a friend of mine at the time, and going through everything.
What I find amazing is that, if you're a medical doctor, you learn how to put a bone back together or do a bone graft or do an implant or whatever it is that you do. It's a very physical practice, whereas yours is quite metaphysical, if I can say that. It's far more difficult because it comes from a place of trusting and faith rather than practical application, even though the applications are technically practical, because like you say, you're quite a logical mind. But a lot of it does come from trusting that the information that you are receiving is the correct information.
100%. That is everything. And I am not a very trusting person. So trusting core was very difficult to begin with. And I find that that is the problem with most of the people who want to do the course, is that they find it extremely difficult to trust what they get. Because they want it to be something different from what it is. And the whole thing is really, energy is energy is energy, and I pick up your energy as I speak to you, you pick up mine as you speak to me. We can connect from here to Timbuktu and do a session there simply because we work with energy. So I have clients all over the world that I do distance sessions with, and it's really quite mind-blowing every time. It's new every time, for me anyway.
Your mind intrigues me because of how you're able to compartmentalize and structure things. It's not something that is common to every person, I can promise you that. I'm someone who likes to try all kinds of modalities to see what resonates with me at that time. I may have tried it 6 years ago and I wasn't in the place to receive it, whereas I might try it 6 years later and think, wow, this is actually, I'm far more open to receiving the treatment. But I really like how your module, or what did you call it, a method, involves a lot of these practices together, and they communicate well with each other.
They communicate beautifully. And it's really been such a journey from beginning to end and ongoing, because what I found is that you learn as you go, and you learn from every client that you see. You learn from every person that you talk to, if you are willing to listen. And that is, I think, partly one of the more important things in any therapy, is that you need to be willing to listen.
Listening, but also being able to listen for the correct things, right? And again, that trust process is where I find most difficulty in this kind of work. So I'm very open to somebody else interpreting for me, but I find it incredibly difficult to interpret for someone else, or get information for someone else, because I don't trust it. I'm immediately, my brain's like, how do you know you didn't just make that up?
Exactly. That is just about every person who's done the course. That's the first question. How do I know it's not me?
Yeah.
Well, it is you. It is also that person, because your whole intention, which to me is everything, is for the best outcome under any circumstances. And that outcome might look like it's horrible. But in the end, if you look back, you'll see that it really wasn't. It was the best thing that could have happened. That's one aspect of it. It's such a wide understanding, really. It's difficult to sort of put it in a nutshell. But in a nutshell, Core is really a therapy that is, it's a method that is really based on understanding how the body functions through energy. And this method is the way to get to that point. Does that make sense?
So you have a different phrase for body, mind, and soul, which is head, heart, and gut.
Yes.
Okay. You have different modules that you teach within Core Regeneration specifically. I believe there's 4.
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind talking us through the different topics that you touch on in each of those 4 modules.
So Core 1 is the basis. It's the groundwork. And basically, if you do a course in Core 1, for instance, it incorporates everything of the others, but the others are expansions on Core 1. So in Core 1, we deal with colors, with meridians. That's part of the course. In Core 2, it's all about meridians and everything around meridians and the nadis and so on.
But I remember with Core 1, it's you do teach kinesiology, or learning to ask the questions, those kinds of things,
Which
right?
I learned through kinesiology as well as body talk. I mean, those methods were, that's how they use it, both of those therapies.
So you were saying in Core 1 you learn about meridians?
Yes, you do.
Okay, and what are meridians?
Meridians are energy lines that run through the body. It's through Chinese medicine, TCM, and that's where we got it from. Is the meridian system is an amazing system. It really
How does
works
that
very well.
differentiate between chakras?
Well, meridians feed chakras, so the energy from the meridians would feed into the chakras, and so nothing stands on its own. So, if you're working with meridians, you're also working with chakras. You're also working with the body's systems, the physical systems. So nothing is actually, and that's the whole understanding, is everything is within everything. Does that answer your question?
Well, I want to understand a better picture of it. So with chakras, you can know that there's 7 chakras, there's a base, there's a heart,
Okay.
What does the meridian line look like?
So the meridian lines run basically from the toes upwards and from the hands inwards. And then some of them go down. There's only one that goes across. But it's meridian lines all along your body. Most of it starts at the tips of your fingers or the tips of your toes. And they are connected through inner trajectories. And all of that energy is connected to all of the chakras. So if you are looking at the meridians, you are also looking at the various chakras, but they're also connected to every organ and endocrine in your body.
Okay, so what kind of understanding do you deepen around these besides what they actually are? How does it help to have a neural connection to those meridian pathways in your body?
Okay, so let me try and give you an example. So if you, for instance, in a session pick up the small intestine meridian, your questioning could go to that you have a broken heart. That could be an answer that you could pick up, because the heart meridian and the small intestine meridian are pairs. So they pair up and they influence each other, as well as everything else. But those are the pairs are the stronger links.
Mm-hmm.
And it will have a person with a broken heart, whether that's physical or not.
And so if it's not physical, where do you go from there in terms of questioning?
As I said, then you will ask, is it physical or subtle? It's 2 simple questions. So if it's physical, you're going to deal with whatever's physical, because if you need to know more about the physical, then you're going to ask other questions. If you need to know more about subtle, so that it's a subtle thing going on here, then, you'll ask, for instance, is it specifically because it's a small intestine, you'll ask, is it about criticism or judgment? Or is it about a broken heart? And there's a whole lot of other questions you can ask, but those are the 2 main ones I would ask. Mm-hmm. Because the broken heart, you're not dealing with the heart meridian, but you're dealing with the small intestine, which is being influenced by whatever's going on in the heart, or that people are feeling they're judged or criticized.
Okay, and so then how does the healing start? So now you've gotten an answer that it's subtle, it's from a feeling of unsafety.
Okay.
What then?
Then we have different balancing methods. So you can use the seed syllables of the chakras. I don't know if you know what those are. Every chakra has a sound, and they're called seed syllables. And you could use the sound. So, for instance, the 7th chakra, the Om, is the seed syllable. Or you could use sound itself, just sound. Or you can use what we call resonance. So those are more friction type sounds.
So you incorporate sound healing into your balancing methodologies.
Also, Reiki, because you might have to work on the aura, or you might have to actually physically use pressure points, something like that.
Okay. What is it that interests you most about the work that you do?
The people.
Do you feel like you help them, or are they there to teach you?
They're there to teach me, because that's why I started doing any therapy anyway, was I needed to do something for myself. And so I started doing the things that interest me. They still interest me, but people fascinate me because everybody is so unique and their circumstances are so beautifully unique. And so every session that you do is so different.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you learn something.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, just to get back to what we were speaking about, because my mind jumps all over the place. We spoke about the first module, so we were going through the rest.
Okay, so the second one is the Meridians. The third one is color and crystals. And it's based on the psychological aspect of all those things. And then the fourth one is really one I really love, is about generational traumas and also birth circumstances. There's more into that course, but those two are really fascinating. So the birth circumstances are basically what we've learned through many years of research, not my research, other people much cleverer than I. They found that from the moment of conception, and even at the moment of conception, the influence on the child after birth is quite phenomenal. And it will, unless we can pick that up and become aware of it, it will affect us all our lives.
What kind of circumstances besides the trauma of coming into light and out of a cozy space?
So, for instance, I had a client who came to see me, and what I picked up was that there was another child before him. So there was a child that was either aborted or miscarried. Then he was born, and during his whole pregnancy, that child's death really influenced the mother's state of mind throughout the pregnancy. We went through the whole situation, and he didn't know. He was, I think, in his mid-30s, and he didn't know of any of that. So I said, well, maybe you'd like to go and speak to your mom about that and ask her whether there was anything like that. And he came back and he said she hadn't spoken to anybody ever about an abortion that she had. And it's always been a guilt. So she never, ever, ever spoke to anybody. So once that was lifted sort of out of the covers, if you will, there was whole different change and understanding of his actions and reactions to women in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
So do you feel that a certain level of awareness and consciousness needs to be brought to a specific situation like that repressed death?
Absolutely.
In order for us to start healing?
What I like to do, because I've had quite a few incidences similar to that, is to ask the client and everybody involved to do a little ritual and basically bury the child and bring them up as part of the family, but doing a ritual and saying goodbye.
I feel like in our society today, the only kind of rituals that we have are the kind of pagan traditions, which is like Christmas, Easter, Halloween, whatever. And then also like getting married. There's a ritual in there, which I really struggle to wrap my head around, because most of my friends who get married they don't really believe in anything. They believe there's a higher power, but they don't believe in God. So then why get a priest and get married under those biblical circumstances? I don't really understand that. Why do you feel like we don't practice these kinds of rituals where we pay respect or homage to, let's say, an aborted child, or acknowledge that a child that died had a soul, had an energetic field? Why do we not allow ourselves to heal? Like, for instance, his mother wouldn't admit that the child died because she carried shame around it. Why do you think in our society today that there weren't spaces for that to be held in a different way?
Well, first of all, we've created so many rules and regulations for what is right and what is wrong, and I think if you go back to, many, many, many years ago, and I wouldn't like to say which age, but they all had rituals. All those beings had rituals. I mean, even if you look at elephants, they have rituals around death. And I think we have perhaps lost the sacredness of being human, of just being. Maybe that's what it is. I also think the rules that we have about what is right and wrong, it's always somebody else's fault. I always say it's either God or the devil, but it's never your fault. So we want to ascribe our lack of empathy, if I can put it that way, in those circumstances. So we don't have the rituals, except we have burials. We do have that, but we don't really have a ritual of standing around and saying goodbye, other than the burial. To me is actually quite creepy. But saying goodbye means that I understand you with me. I understand that you needed to leave for whatever reason, and so we're going to honor that around you. Does this make any sense? Because I don't really want to put it that way, but Christianity is really very strict about what is right and what is wrong. And sometimes I think people tend to take it too far.
To a point where the separation actually is an otherness, and that removes you from love, from reality.
Exactly. Yes, because
that everybody has their own way of doing things.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you had to think about that guy and his dead sibling, when they sat around the table, gave the child a name, did the whole thing about we saying goodbye, but we're acknowledging that you are part of our circle
system. Yes,
that relieved those people. That relieved them. It's like, I'm not carrying the secrets, and believe me, if the mom carried the secret, so did the child, and that child will carry that forward unless it stopped somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So to go back to what you were saying around the birth, okay, you gave that example of that gentleman with his dead sibling. What other trauma could we have? Basically, what I want to ask is, how does the mother's mindset cause so much ailment in a baby? So one of the things that I listened to on a previous podcast that you had been on, you said that we create or accept disease or illness before it's even manifested in our body. It's like a thought pattern that then turns into manifestation. How do you then describe a child that's born with leukemia? Is that from the mother's mindset or her agreeing that on some subconscious level?
Yeah, I could probably get into a lot of trouble with that. But I think something like that would be that it goes back generations. It probably doesn't necessarily go back to one generation, i.e. your mother. It probably goes back further than that. And there's a whole lot of influences other than just mindset that can cause this. So I would say if there's something like that, I would go back generations and see where did this all start. We know that, for instance, people who were in Auschwitz and survived and came out, their children's children suffer from things like, i.e., depression, claustrophobia, serious depression. There's so much, and that's what I love about all of this. We are so layered. There are so many layers to every single person, and if we keep going back and back and back, we'll find more and more and more and more. And then we sit, and we've got all the baggage of all our generations past. which makes us unique, which makes us really beautiful, really, for me. But we do need to acknowledge certain things in order to be able to deal with how we act and react in certain circumstances.
Mm-hmm. What do you think makes for a fulfilled, wholesome, healthy life?
Is there such a thing?
I believe there can be.
I think one of the things I teach my students is that don't think, no matter what you do, that you will ever stop growing. Growth isn't easy. Change isn't easy. And if you think you can stop here because at the moment I feel wonderful and I'm happy and I'm content and I'm healthy, that might change tomorrow. But it's up to you how you're going to deal with it. And then you could, in 2 years' time or a year's time or 6 months' time, you might feel the same way. There's no static area in anybody's life.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps changing and evolving.
But you do on some level believe that you can have some fundamental principles that help you to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's true. That is true. I mean, if I take my life was certainly never very easy. But then I don't know of anybody who has a really, really easy life. Everybody had trouble. Everybody had some kind of trauma. But it's how you live your day-to-day life and staying present to that. I believe that helps you move through anything. Doesn't mean you don't get stressed, you don't get anxious, you don't get nervous. It doesn't mean you don't feel unhappy or sad at any point in your life. It just means that you are able to deal with that easier.
To change your perspective on it. Like everything that comes to you is a lesson in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
So to see it in that manner.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've spoken about Core Regeneration, a little bit about the modules and what it looks like to come into a session with you. In terms of the students that you teach, are they looking to become practitioners or are they just looking to use these methodologies in their own?
Both. Some they want to become practitioners. We have a couple of Sangomas who have done the course and they love it because they incorporate it in what they do. And that's really the beauty, I think, also of Core, is that you can use it with anything. You know, it doesn't have to be used. And when you've done the course, it becomes your unique therapy. It's not written in stone. It changes as it suits you. And you become the teacher of Core, if you will, because everybody is different and everybody's circumstances are different. Everybody's knowledge base is different. So they will use it as they see fit. The only rule there is that you need to understand what you're doing and the sacred space that you're working in. Because if you don't, it won't work. Simple as that.
You spoke a little bit about integrity and like intention. Why are those so important to you and what do they actually, how would you define integrity?
Well, integrity, first of all, I think is about understanding what you're doing. So if you understand what Core is about and the space that you're working in, I think you can't help but have integrity. So integrity for me is just you don't do any harm. Core itself is we worked it out so that if you are not intentionally aligned with what you're doing, it won't work. It might work once or twice, but then it won't work anymore. Intention is everything. You can't, and intention and integrity is very closely related. So if you have the wrong intention, you know, certain things you want to know who's cheating on who, those are not questions you're allowed to ask, because
it's a sacred space.
Exactly.
You like compromising the safety of the space almost.
And it's not a party trick. It's not something I can quickly do for you at a party or at a gathering or something. It's not a party trick. And you need to honor always what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. I love that. What are some of the most profound things that you've experienced with people, like some really pivotal stories that have shifted your perspective or opened your mind to something that you never ever thought was possible?
Well, years ago, I was asked to do a session on a dog because the dog was ill, and it was a distance session. The lady lives in Cape Town, and I did the session for the dog. And basically, I can't tell you the whole session, but basically what came up was that there was something wrong with the kidneys. And so 2 years go by, and she phones me and she says, the dog is ill again, but this time they want to operate on its spine because it's in serious pain. And I did a session, came up with kidneys again, which I didn't remember of the first one. And she went, eventually, it's a long story, but she went and took the dog to 3 different specialists. And the last one did a scan of the kidneys, and they found the dog had kidney cancer. To me, that was mind-blowing because I picked up kidneys. I will never pick up anything that I can diagnose. I'm not allowed to do that. You can't diagnose. You're not a medical doctor. So it just came up with kidneys. So if I come up with anything like that again, I will ask people to have it checked.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was really quite mind-blowing for me. Simple things that are really so, I don't have a word for it. It's just so...
It's like a miracle.
It's like a miracle. Magic. Yes, magic. I like that.
My distant friend had the most amazing experience with this lady who was talking to animals. And I was like, this is nonsense. That's not a real thing. Anyway, so her horse kept going lame. It kept getting a limp. And it was a proper show jumping horse. She paid a lot of money for it, and it kept limping. And she would give it 6 months in a pasture and then bring it back. And it was absolutely fine, very sound. She would start jumping it again and it would have a limp. And she was so devastated by this horse because she's like, am I ever going to get to ride it properly? And so she brought this woman in out of desperation. And this woman said this horse's heart is totally shattered because it lost its baby.
Oh.
And can't get over that. And she's like, but I don't think this horse has ever had a baby. So she called the previous owners and said, has this horse ever been pregnant or given birth? And they said, yeah, but she lost the baby. And that was kind of like, what? So it was a lot of, this woman came back for more therapy sessions. And it's actually quite cool. As she puts her hand on the horse's head, it like sleeps. And she was acknowledging that this horse had this trauma and that she's sorry, and it showed me how like profoundly spiritual animals actually
Absolutely.
are. They're very spiritual beings.
I also worked on a horse. I was asked to come and work on a horse somewhere in Kailami because same reason, the horse keeps going lame. And all I got from this horse was he didn't want to work. That's it. He doesn't want to work. He just wants to be outside and play and do whatever he wants to do. He doesn't want to work. Don't get on my back. While I was working on him, there was another horse in the stable behind me, and he kept on chopping at the door. So when I was done with this horse, I turned around and I walked to him. And as I got to the door, he just put his head against my chest. And it was like, oh, thank God somebody's listening to me. So I picked up something with the foot. Can't remember what it was. And they said, no, there was a problem there before, but it's fixed now. And then they had it tested, and they found there was something growing there that needed to be removed. It wasn't limping, but he
knew it was in his foot. Something interesting, again, that on your other podcast, one of the things you spoke about is dissociation, and how if you're body, mind, and soul, the Trinity, is not connected and not communicating well with one another, then you can dissociate to a point where you gave a description of a client that you had, that you kept getting ankle, and she had long pants on. And every time you asked her, is there anything wrong with your ankle? She said no. 7 times you said. And then eventually when you pulled up her pants, you saw that she had an open wound that wasn't healing. And it had been operated on and it just wasn't healing. And that's how far her dissociation ran, that she actually forgot that she had a wound on her ankle. So she couldn't even tell you that she had that. Do you think that was her escaping from the pain?
Well, that could certainly be. I find a lot that women especially tend to dissociate from their bodies because their bodies are not good enough for whatever reason, or their bodies betrayed them in some way. People who have had their uterus removed very often completely dissociate from their bodies because then they're of no use anymore. And there's a whole complicated situation with that usually. But women, more so than men, tend to dissociate from their bodies. I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too short, I'm too tall, whatever the case may be. So my body is just something I drag around. Mm-hmm. It's not something of any value to me, which is really sad.
So how do you get a very clear communication pathway from mind, body, and soul? How, if you are someone who hasn't really done any of this kind of work, it all starts in the mind. You said the mind is the first trigger or association point that we understand logically because we speak the language of the mind. But then how do you translate that or learn how to connect the 3 together?
It takes work, and it's not going to happen overnight. And that's the thing people want. They want to take a quick fix. They want something that's going to fix you tomorrow. In our work, that just doesn't happen. So one of the things that I would suggest for any woman that has that kind of problem would, lie in bed and touch your body. Feel your legs, feel your knees, feel your hips, feel every part of your body and understand how beautiful it is. It's very hard to do that in the beginning. It's like stripping yourself naked and watching yourself in a mirror. People can't do that. So before you do that, touch your body. Be appreciative of what it actually does. Your knees are magic. They work unbelievably hard. Your hips move you forward. There's so much about your body that is so magnificent. How can you not love it? So if you keep doing that for a while, maybe then you can stand in the mirror and actually look at yourself and appreciate the magnificence of being a human being.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's connecting mind to body. What about the soul?
I think once that connection is made, your connection to your soul is easier and sort of comes naturally. Because if you're only living off your mind, you really don't connect very well with your soul at all. So, well, that's my opinion. And I think once you understand the beauty of being human, and then going into there's more to all of this than just my skin and my bones.
What is the soul?
The soul is really, I think, the understanding of all the energies in all of the universe. So I don't know if you know Professor Brian Cox. You've never heard of him?
No.
Do yourself a favor. He's awesome. And he talks about the universe, and he's a physicist. And he talks a lot about the universe and how we fit into the universe and how the universe, it's very technical, but I love it because in the end, we are all beings of light. So if we understand that the body, actually, if you take a sliver of the heart and put it on a powerful microscope, you can see a light in every cell of that sliver of the heart. They did that in California, in the Heart Math Institute. It's fascinating. You're a fascinating creature. And if everything is understood better, then the soul needs to be understood. You have no choice.
Have you ever heard of Gary Zukav?
Yes.
He wrote a book called The Seat of the Soul. I love the analogy he gave of the soul is like the mothership going through the ocean. It's this humongous boat, bigger than any boat you could ever even imagine. And your body is like a life raft that's towing behind the boat in the wake of the boat. And so your communication with the soul is through the like a walkie-talkie,
the
basically.
radio.
Yes, the radio. Thank you. The more you stray out of the wake, the more tumultuous your journey or path is going to be, because now you're in the big oceans by yourself, and it's going to keep dragging you back into that wake.
Yeah.
And the further you stray, the bigger the drop's going to be.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting analogy to show you how vast your soul actually is, and connecting to it brings you to a different vibrational state.
Absolutely. And I also think if you are truly connected to, if all three of these are connected, which is the important part, then all of life seems easier. Because for me, I always say nothing is important unless you make it so.
Mm.
So the importance of anything is in your mind, nobody else's. Small thing might be important to me,
assign
but it's
to
not.
it. Yes.
So, and I'm not saying that I'm the be-all or end-all by any means, but I have learned in my 70 years that there is a way of dealing with difficulties that doesn't paralyze you. You can go on. You can do this.
Another thing that you spoke about, which I found quite interesting, is depression.
There are so many different kinds of depressions, but at the same time, it's all the same thing. It's based on something in your past of, whether that's your past or whether it's your mother's past or going back generations. Depression is a very deep-seated thing. And it's not something that you're going to snap a finger and get out of.
I heard someone say depression is the emotional state of hopelessness.
And helplessness.
Mm.
Yes, absolutely. And that affects your small intestine and your stomach.
So it's just a bad cycle.
Absolutely.
Of
because you can't
sabotaging.
separate. You can't separate one thing from the next. Everything works together. And if one thing doesn't work, it affects everything else. So depression is a big story these days. And I know a very dear client of mine had a very bad accident off a horse. And had a brain injury. It was very bad. And she was given some kind of antidepressant. And she phoned me and she said, I'm feeling suicidal. I can't understand what's going on. They do that if you had a brain injury. You do tend to suffer from depression. So this guy gave it to her, and then he went on holiday and she couldn't get hold of him. So then she went and Googled all the interesting things about this. And one of the side effects is suicide.
Of the antidepressant?
Of the antidepressant.
How ironic.
It's on Google. You can read it. I'm not saying that. It's crazy. And I'm not saying it doesn't work for some people. It does seem to work. But one has to be very careful about, what you take, how much you take of it, even supplements.
I think also a huge part of it is, like you said, intention. So, for instance, people taking Ozempic to lose weight or to regulate their blood sugar, it was made for people with diabetes, but most of us are using it in society today for weight loss. And that's cool. If you have the intention of using it for 3 to 6 months, so that you can regulate your blood sugar, you no longer lust for sweets or whatever. You can develop different habits. You can learn to fast because it allows you, it's a peptide, so it it basically tells your mind that you are full, you're sustained. So obviously you're eating less calories, you're bound to lose weight. It's a very effective drug. But if you are using it to continue to eat the same crap you've been eating, but just less of it, of course you're going to lose weight. But when you stop using the medication, you're just going to gain that weight back on because you're eating the wrong things and you haven't even developed a mindset to change. And I know quite a few people who are on that path. Same as antidepressants. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, of course, but these are just things that, we deal with as people because friends of ours are on these things. And a friend of mine who's been taking them for years, he's tried different ones. He goes through the right processes of weaning himself off them and then, taking a break. But he takes it with the understanding of regulating his dopamine levels and he's read up about them. He understands exactly how they're chemically working in his brain. He has a relationship with the medication. He's not just taking it to numb something. He knows how his body, how his brain works on it, and he knows how he can function on it and what it looks like to not function with it. So I think the intention is better than someone who's just flatlining, feels numb, doesn't know what's going on in their reality, hasn't checked in with themselves in a long time. But doctors don't necessarily teach us this stuff. I mean, I can go to a doctor today and go and get Ritalin if I just say, I can't concentrate, I need to study, my brain's all over the place. There's no talk of meditation, exercising, a healthier diet, what my mental state looks like. It's, do you want Ritalin, Concerta? Yes.
Exactly. So how can they? Because they are basically forced to have 15 to 20-minute sessions with you. There's no way you can make an in-depth discovery of what's going on with that person in 15 to 20 minutes. No way. And every time you come back to that doctor, you have to go through the whole process again because he can't remember you mostly. It's like a sausage machine. So doctors are under pressure as well.
Of course.
And the thing with chemical medication is that they seem to rely on the guys who sell it. So I'm selling you whatever I'm selling you and I'm telling you how it works. Instead of actually going out and studying what this thing does and understand how it can affect some people and how it can affect other people, I don't find the doctors do that.
I've been seeing as well, the last time I went to the doctor, he ran so many blood tests that I didn't ask for. I paid close to 8,500 Rand for blood tests, all to find everything looks pretty normal. But that's another thing that they do. It could be any one of these 15 things, so let's just test for all of them. Are you joking? And again, if they had utilized any of the tactics or techniques that you've set out in your methodology, they might be a little bit more connected to the client, inclined to suggest something that's a little bit more different. But again, how do you see medical practitioners who are very practical led or based people?
So I did a session on a lady who came to see me, and I picked up 3 things that she was deficient in. What I didn't know was she was also under the care of a doctor that I know quite well. And she went to see him afterwards, and she told him what I'd picked up. And he was actually quite upset because he said, I studied all these years and you picked this up in 3 minutes. And he didn't. He had to do all the blood tests, then you get the blood tests back or whatever. So you do 15 blood tests for no reason. So maybe if we could corroborate somehow, and I could say, okay, well, that's what I pick up. Maybe you could test for those first. One of the things I pick up or have picked up in the past is gallbladder issues. A lot of people have gallbladder issues. Doctors don't test for it for some unknown reason. And I had a lady we picked up gallbladder with her over and over and over and over, and she started getting hives and terrible things happening to her. And finally, they tested the gallbladder, and they found a duck egg size stone in the gallbladder, and I had to remove the gallbladder. Now, if you had listened 3 years ago, if I was able to, talk with you, maybe you could have prevented that just through food.
Mm-hmm. And what do you say to medical practitioners, or what would your message be to medical practitioners out there that think that the work that you do is woo-woo and it's not based on any solid evidence? How would you encourage them to be more open-minded?
So, first of all, we have integrative doctors these days. So there's a better understanding. It's not a full understanding, but it's a better understanding. I did a lecture or a talk for, I think there were about 6 or 7 doctors in the room, well-known doctors in Gauteng, and they seemed to be very open to it. What they said behind my back, I don't know, but if we could just talk about it.
Yes, there
if
should
I
be
could
room
just
for
show
discussion.
you how it works, maybe we could make changes that are easier.
Because I believe that if they experienced it for themselves, time and time again, they would say, okay, maybe there is method to this madness.
Yeah.
Maybe this is something that we could utilize. What is your dream for the practice that you have and the methodology that you teach? Do you want to continue to make more programs? Do you want to open up a bigger practice in collaboration with the medical industry? What does it look like, the future for you?
I've thought about this so many times, and my biggest dream was always to be able to teach this to anybody who wants to do it for free, because it's an expensive course, and there are many people who would love to do it and can't afford it. So I have done free courses for people. But the problem with that is they do the free course and then they don't use it, which is interesting. I don't know why people do that. But for Core in the future, I would just like to expand it more. I would like more people to do the course, even if it's just for understanding more about your body-mind system.
Do you have a book?
No.
Why not?
My manuals are my books.
Okay. And would you ever consider publishing your manuals to the greater public?
I don't know. I've thought about that as well, because unless you understand the method, the book is going to make no sense to you, or the manual is going to make no sense to you.
But surely you could give quite a comprehensive understanding of the method before people read on to
You could probably do that. You could probably do that. I haven't actually thought in depth about it, but about Core itself, I just like to expand it. Have more people do the course, more people understanding what it's about, because it's such an awesome thing to see people suddenly getting it and being wowed by it, and everybody except one person in all the years I've done it since 2002, one person didn't like it.
But that's part of their own belief systems as well.
Definitely. And the rest, everybody loved it. Everybody is wowed by it. Whatever they do with it afterwards is up to them. But there's definitely then a deeper understanding of who you are, what you are.
Do you feel like it's your purpose here on earth to help heal people?
I think your purpose on earth is just to be here and to experience, and whatever route you take is going to be good or bad, but it's going to have the consequences that you either going to love or not. I don't really believe that there's one purpose in your life other than just living the best life you can.
And experiencing what it is to be human, like you said. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to touch on?
Sure. No, I think we've covered most of the bits of core that we can talk about. If there's anything more that I could expand on, it's the birth circumstances thing. It is so important to understand where you come from, not only generationally, but what happened while your mom was pregnant with you, what happened at the moment of birth. Remember, birth is an incredibly traumatic thing, not for the mother as much as for the baby. And especially now, because most babies are born through C-section. It's very traumatic because you're suddenly ripped away of that safe space, that warm space, and hopefully loving space, into a cold, noisy world. It's very traumatic. And then anything from there up until the age of 2 and or 7, anything that happens there really sort of cements the personality.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that I find, firstly, very fascinating, and secondly, I think it's important that everybody knows where they come from and what happened during those 9 months that you were completely helpless in that situation.
And for people whose parents might have died or they don't know their mothers and can't ask those questions, can they ask their bodies?
You can. You can. The only problem is you can't corroborate it unless you have other people that can give you the information. So, I can tell you, your mother had a violent experience while she was pregnant with you. But unless you can go and ask your mother or somebody that knows about the circumstances, nobody can corroborate it.
Mm.
And we tend to want that. We want to know.
Confirmation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically, just to end off, well, first of all, is there anything you want to ask me?
What made you choose me and Core?
Well, because I've come for a session, first of all.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
And Gary speaks very highly of you. And I find all of these different modalities very interesting. And I like learning more about them from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Also, so that I can find a way to integrate all of these things into my understanding. Because the more questions I ask, the deeper my understanding goes, the less fear there is around whether this is a good or bad thing. Everyone is saying pretty much the same thing, that your intentions are what matters in the fight of good and evil. And that these practices help to heal, and that's actually what God calls us to do, is to heal and to forgive and to love. So, yeah, like I said, I find your mind very interesting. I think to create anything that's difficult and quite complex, as much as you call it simple, it's complex. Because unless you have an open mind to receive the information in a way that you can integrate it and use it, then all of it's just word salad, So, yeah, I find your mind very interesting in that way, that you were able to create this method and use it, and you can physically see it making an impact out in the world. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
How old are you?
70. I'm turning 71 February.
Okay. 70 years on this earth.
70 years on this earth.
What will you leave us with in terms of a quote or something that you've learned over the years that you would want someone my age to know?
Oh, there's a lot, really. I think probably stay present. Stay present. Because if you're present, your anxiety is 90% less. Because anxiety is always based on the future, what you learned from the past. And anxiety is a disease at the moment.
Crippling.
Yes. So I would say stay present.
I was actually thinking that meditation works because if you get it, I mean, I don't meditate a lot, but I find myself to be an incredibly present person. Like I live in the now. Even when I'm driving, I'm like totally conscious of what's going on around me because I believe that I create everything around me. So for me, it's a form of meditation, if you will.
I get that. Yeah.
And like even if I listen to a podcast, I'm able to absorb the information in a way that if we were having a conversation, because I'm presently listening to it and absorbing it. But I get with meditation that it teaches you, if you are someone who is unconscious, unpresent, doesn't know what it feels like to be centered, present, calm, then you do need to sit in a room. I'm not saying I wouldn't benefit from it. I would hugely. And it's an avoidance I think all of us are trapped in. And then it makes me think, okay, if meditation teaches you to do that, what other things could you do that could get you into a state of utter joy so that you can know how to breathing? Okay, so experiencing things or putting yourself in situations where you can learn feelings that you never knew existed before, or you knew they existed but you didn't know, like self-love. If you are repulsed by yourself, rejecting yourself on a daily basis, of course you're going to be so far away from self-love or even knowing how to compliment yourself or take a compliment from somebody. Whereas if you give yourself that ability to, like you said, appreciate your knees, if you're going to start there, and then let it infiltrate the rest of your body, at least you've learned that feeling. I also heard another interesting podcast that the chick was saying, if you want to get rid of something, like for instance, you want to be less hateful, then you need to starve whatever it is in your life that creates that. If you want to get rid of your anger, then stop being so judgmental of the world and stop the programming inside of you that says, I need to define everything as good and bad. It's more like, oh, I should rather just see everything as it is. And whatever I'm perceiving as good and bad, that's because I've programmed myself to think that way. It can be different and I can change instantaneously if I make that decision. So yeah, I like that idea of starving things.
Yep.
Self-rejection, I can say to myself, that's no longer my programming. Every time I want to be judgmental, I'm going to thank my knees.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And by the way, we do in Core 4, we teach people about statements. So you have a little statement like, I had this lady who came to see me and she needed to use a statement, and it was, I commit to life. Just that.
Wow.
And she literally, for 45 minutes, lay on the bed and couldn't say it because she cannot commit to life. And until and it's so simple, you take a deep breath because the breathing is part and parcel of everything. You take a breath, you say the statement, where do you feel it in your body? Another way of connecting with your body and understanding where these things sit in your body. There's a book called The Body Keeps Score. You have a fascinating, magical body. Well, the whole body-mind system, it's not separate from anything else. But I am always blown away by it. And simply a statement, I commit to life. Why can't you commit to life? What is so hard about committing to life?
And what's the payoff to not committing to life?
Exactly. You think you're in control. And the more you think you're in control, the more stressed you are because you know
now
you're
you
not.
have to control something that's not controllable.
Exactly.
So let it go. Let go and let God. That's what I always tell myself.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, Helene. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for
thank
having
you for the work that you do. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate your time with us again today. If you would like to see somebody else on the podcast that I have not had on yet, please tag them below. Please give us a subscribe, and yeah, we will see you next time. Thank you, Helene.
Thank you.
Ciao.